America is the greatest country in the world, but we didn't get here by accident. We've had some amazing presidents in our history, and here's some unconventional life advice from every one of them. George Washington was America's first president and led the fight for independence. He could have been king, but he gave up power after 2 terms, setting an example for future leaders. What most people miss about Washington is that his greatest show of strength wasn't in wielding power, it was in walking away from it. While ambitious men throughout history have fought to grab and keep control, Washington proved that it's cool to voluntarily give up power. His legacy shows that sometimes the path to lasting respect isn't in holding on, but in knowing exactly when to let go. John Adams fought hard for American independence as one of our founding fathers. He was known for being super honest and speaking his mind, even when it wasn't popular. Adams teaches us the counterintuitive truth that unpopularity can be a sign you're doing something right. When everyone was demanding blood after the Boston Massacre, Adams risked his reputation by defending British soldiers because he believed in justice over mob approval. His career proves that taking unpopular stands doesn't destroy your legacy. It might be the very thing that defines it centuries later. While Adams showed that unpopularity can be your greatest asset, the next president would reveal how obsession can change history. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence and doubled the size of America by buying the Louisiana Territory. He was a man who valued knowledge with interests in science, architecture, and philosophy. Jefferson's unconventional approach teaches us that specialization is sometimes overrated. In an age where we're told to find one thing and master it, Jefferson reminds us that curiosity across many fields can lead to breakthrough thinking. His diverse interests weren't distractions, but the source of his greatest insights. True innovation doesn't come from narrow expertise, but from connecting ideas across completely different domains. Jefferson's refusal to specialize changed America forever. But our next president would show that physical limitations can be your greatest advantage. James Madison was the main writer of our Constitution, despite being the shortest president at just 5 feet 4 inches. He's proof that your physical size doesn't limit your impact on the world. Madison's success reveals the surprising power of being underestimated. His small stature made others overlook him, giving him the space to develop his mind while bigger, louder men fought for attention. What seems like your greatest weakness, whether it's size, background, or personality, can become your secret weapon when you leverage it correctly instead of trying to overcome it. Madison turned being underestimated into his advantage, while our next president would demonstrate how impoliteness can actually earn respect. James Monroe was president during the era of good feelings, a time when America was united and growing. He created the Monroe Doctrine that told European powers to stay out of American affairs. What's fascinating about Monroe is that being blunt with foreign powers earned him more respect than careful diplomacy. By clearly telling European nations to back off from the Americas, he didn't create enemies. He gained their respect. His presidency shows that sometimes drawing hard lines isn't rude. It's the clearest form of communication. People respect boundaries far more than they appreciate flexibility. Monroe showed how bluntness can command respect, while our next president would reveal why failure might be your launching pad. John Quincy Adams was the son of a president who became president himself. After leaving office, he returned to Congress and fought against slavery for many years, showing it's never too late to find your true purpose. Adams teaches the surprising lesson that your greatest contributions might come after your biggest public failure. While most men would have hidden away after losing re-election as president, Adams reinvented himself in Congress and accomplished more fighting slavery than he ever did in the White House. His life proves that what looks like the end of your story might actually be the beginning of something more meaningful. While Adams found his true mission after defeat, our next president would demonstrate why being rough around the edges beats polish. Andrew Jackson was a tough frontier president who survived duels, battles, and an assassination attempt. He was the first common man to become president instead of a wealthy elite from Virginia or Massachusetts. Jackson flipped the script on what leadership looks like. Instead of refinement and sophisticated manners, his authenticity, even when crude, connected with ordinary Americans. His success teaches that polishing away your rough edges doesn't make you more appealing. It makes you forgettable. In a world of carefully crafted images, embracing your unfiltered self gives people something real to rally behind. Jackson's unpolished authenticity changed politics forever, while our next leader would show why working behind the scenes beats the spotlight. But before we get into that, if you're sick of being average and want to unlock your full potential, subscribe to Forge Theory so you don't miss any of our future videos. Martin Van Buren was the first president born as an American citizen and not a British subject. He was a master behind-the-scenes politician who created one of the first modern political parties. Van Buren reveals the counterintuitive truth that visibility isn't power, systems are. While fame seekers chase the spotlight, he understood that creating the right structures behind the scenes gives you more lasting influence than being the face out front. His career proves that the people who build the ladders often have more impact than those who climb them. While Van Buren mastered working behind the scenes, our next president would show us that a single detail can matter more than grand plans. William Henry Harrison had the shortest presidency, dying just 31 days after taking office. Harrison's presidency teaches a counterintuitive lesson about focusing too much on appearance. In trying to prove his vigor with a lengthy speech without proper protection from the bad weather, he ultimately created circumstances that may have contributed to getting pneumonia and severe diarrhea weeks later and causing his death. His story reminds us that sometimes the small details we ignore, like taking care of our basic needs, matter more than the big impressions we're trying to make. Harrison's focus on appearance over practicality reminds us about life's fragility, while the next president would demonstrate the advantage of being underestimated. John Tyler was the first vice president to become president after a president died. Many people questioned his right to full presidential powers, calling him his accidency. Tyler shows why being dismissed by others can be your secret weapon. When Congress expected him to be a figurehead they could control, his firm stance and refusal to back down established precedents that changed the presidency forever. His experience teaches that sometimes being underestimated doesn't require a response. Tyler thrived by being underestimated, but our next president would reveal why limiting your ambition leads to greater achievement. James K. Polk set 4 clear goals for his presidency and accomplished all of them in just one term. He expanded America to the Pacific Ocean and chose not to run for a second term. Polk's presidency proves the paradoxical truth that limiting your ambitions is the key to achievement. Unlike leaders who make endless promises, he focused on just 4 specific goals and declined to seek re-election. By concentrating his energy and setting a definite endpoint, he accomplished more in 4 years than most presidents did in 8. His example turns conventional wisdom on its head. Sometimes wanting less lets you achieve more. Polk's self-imposed limitations led to greater success, while our next leader would teach a surprising lesson about enjoying today before tomorrow's victories. Zachary Taylor was a war hero and our 12th president. He died after just 16 months in office after becoming ill following a 4th of July celebration where he consumed cherries and cold milk, though he suffered for 5 days before passing. Taylor's brief presidency offers a sobering reminder that tomorrow's victories mean nothing if you sacrifice today's joys. After spending decades in military service, he finally reached the presidency only to die before accomplishing his goals. The irony of his story isn't just about cherries and milk, it's about a man who delayed gratification his entire career, only to run out of time just when he reached the pinnacle. Sometimes waiting to enjoy life until after you've made it means never enjoying it at all. Taylor's postponed joys remind us life is fleeting, but our next president would show how education can come from anywhere but classrooms. Millard Fillmore rose from extreme poverty to become president without any formal education. He taught himself to read using borrowed books and later built a personal library of thousands of volumes. Fillmore upends our assumptions about education and success. In an era where we're told formal credentials are essential, he proved that self-education can take you further than any classroom. His rise from poverty shows that the hunger to learn matters more than how or where you learn. True education isn't about degrees or institutions. It's about the relentless pursuit of knowledge however you can get it. Fillmore showed the power of teaching yourself, while our next president would demonstrate the strength in breaking down rather than pushing through. Franklin Pierce's presidency was overshadowed by personal tragedy when his only living son was killed in a train accident right before his inauguration. His term saw increasing tensions that would eventually lead to the Civil War. Pierce's story reveals the counterintuitive strength in letting yourself break down. After witnessing his son's death, he didn't hide his grief, but let himself openly mourn while still taking office. In a world that praises pushing through hardship, Pierce reminds us that sometimes allowing yourself to be visibly broken is not weakness. It's the most honest form of strength. Acknowledging when you're not okay takes more courage than pretending everything is fine. Pierce showed that visible grief can be strength, while our next president would teach us the danger of trying to make everyone happy. James Buchanan was the only president who never married, and his indecisive leadership failed to prevent the Civil War. Many historians rank him as one of our worst presidents because he tried to compromise on issues that couldn't be compromised. Buchanan's failed presidency offers a vital but difficult truth. Trying to please everyone guarantees you'll solve nothing. By attempting to find middle ground between slavery advocates and abolitionists, he satisfied neither and allowed the problem to worsen. His administration proves that some conflicts can't be settled with compromise. They require taking a clear stand, even if it means being divisive. Consensus seeking isn't always wise. Sometimes it's just cowardice, wearing a diplomatic mask. Buchanan's people-pleasing led to disaster, but our next president would show how early struggles prepare you for crisis. Abraham Lincoln led America through its darkest hour during the Civil War and freed millions of enslaved people. He grew up in poverty with almost no formal education, but became one of our greatest presidents. Lincoln's journey reveals the unexpected advantage of a difficult beginning. Far from being obstacles, his poverty and lack of formal education gave him exactly what he needed to lead during crisis: resilience, empathy, and practical wisdom. His ability to hold the nation together didn't come despite his hard early life, but because of it. Sometimes your greatest challenges aren't preparing you for success. They're preparing you for significance. Lincoln's early hardships equipped him for greatness, while our next president would demonstrate why stubbornness can be your downfall. Andrew Johnson was a Southern Democrat who stayed loyal to the Union and became Lincoln's vice president. After Lincoln's assassination, his presidency was marked by conflict with Congress that led to his impeachment. Johnson's turbulent presidency reveals the surprising difference between principled conviction and mere stubbornness. While standing firm on beliefs sounds admirable, his refusal to adapt to political realities nearly cost him his office and damaged Reconstruction. His story teaches the difficult lesson that knowing when to bend isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the highest form of leadership. Flexibility in methods while remaining true to your principles is wiser than rigidity in both. Johnson's inflexibility nearly destroyed him, but our next leader would show how personal integrity doesn't guarantee good judgment. Ulysses S. Grant was a brilliant general who led Union forces to victory in the Civil War. As president, he fought for the rights of freed slaves, but his administration was plagued by corruption scandals. Grant's presidency offers a surprising warning. Personal honesty doesn't guarantee effective leadership. Though personally incorruptible, his blind trust in dishonest friends led to scandal-plagued years in office. His experience proves that surrounding yourself with people of questionable character will eventually compromise your own reputation, no matter how honest you are personally. Sometimes the hardest part of integrity isn't being honest yourself. It's having the wisdom to recognize dishonesty in others. Grant's personal integrity couldn't save him from poor judgment in allies, while our next president would teach us about the upside of unpopular choices. Rutherford B. Hayes became president after the most disputed election in American history. He worked to restore trust in government after years of scandal and withdrew federal troops from the South, ending Reconstruction. Hayes shows us the counterintuitive value of making enemies for the right reasons. By making choices that disappointed his own supporters, he put the nation's healing above political advantage. His presidency teaches that sometimes making everyone angry at once might be the clearest sign you're doing something right. True leadership often means willingly sacrificing popularity for progress, even when it costs you in the short term. Hayes made necessary enemies through difficult choices, while our next president would show how education creates luck others call tragic. James Garfield rose from poverty to become a college president, Civil War general, and then president of the United States. His presidency showed great promise, but ended when he was shot just 4 months after taking office. Garfield's brief presidency reveals that what looks like bad luck is often the dividend of preparation. Though his death seems tragically random, his rise from canal boat worker to president wasn't accidental. It was the direct result of his relentless self-education. His story proves that while we can't control when opportunity or tragedy strikes, we can control whether we're prepared when either arrives. Sometimes what others call luck is really preparation meeting circumstance. Garfield's preparation created his lucky rise from poverty to power, while our next president would teach us that reinvention beats consistency. Chester A. Arthur was a party insider known for corruption before becoming president after Garfield's assassination. Surprisingly, he became a reformer who cleaned up the same corrupt systems he once benefited from. Arthur upends our assumptions about character being fixed. Instead of continuing as the corrupt politician everyone expected, he completely reinvented himself, attacking the very patronage system that had advanced his career. His transformation proves that your past doesn't have to dictate your future. Sometimes the person most qualified to fix a broken system is the one who knows its flaws from the inside. True growth isn't about steady improvement, but sometimes about radical reinvention. Arthur's complete reinvention shows we can all change, while our next president would demonstrate why losing might be your best preparation. Grover Cleveland was the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, losing his re-election but then winning again 4 years later. He was known for his honesty and willingness to take unpopular stands on principle. Cleveland's comeback reveals why losing can be better preparation than winning. His time out of office gave him perspective that continuous success never could. While most see defeat as failure, his experience shows that sometimes losing is exactly what you need to develop the wisdom that leads to greater success later. The painful gap between his terms wasn't an interruption of his story, it was the critical chapter that made his return possible. Cleveland's defeat prepared him for greater success, while our next president would reveal why temporary roles deserve your full commitment. Benjamin Harrison served between Grover Cleveland's 2 terms and was the grandson of a previous president. Despite being sandwiched between Cleveland's terms, he accomplished important work expanding American influence globally. Harrison teaches us the unexpected value of being the in-between person. Though remembered mainly as the president between Cleveland's terms, he embraced his temporary role and made significant contributions rather than merely warming the seat. His approach proves that sometimes the jobs we see as stepping stones or temporary positions are exactly where we can make our greatest impact. Not despite their temporary nature, but because of the freedom it provides. Harrison embraced his role as the in-between, while our next president would show us again that principle outweighs popularity. In his second term, Cleveland faced a severe economic depression and growing labor unrest. He maintained his principles but lost public support by making tough choices during economic crisis. Cleveland's second term reveals the counterintuitive truth that making people angry can be the right leadership move. His principled approach teaches that sometimes the loudest public criticism is evidence you're making necessary but difficult choices. Real leadership often means willingly becoming the villain in the short-term story to be vindicated in the long-term history. Cleveland's willingness to be disliked for good reasons earned lasting respect, while our next leader would teach us that strength and kindness aren't opposites. William McKinley led America to victory in the Spanish-American War and expanded American influence around the world. His presidency marked America's emergence as a global power before he was assassinated in 1901. McKinley defied the assumption that strength requires harshness. Unlike leaders who believe intimidation demonstrates power, he combined decisive action with genuine courtesy. His approach proves that treating others with respect isn't a sign of weakness, but a different kind of strength. Sometimes the most powerful people aren't those who raise their voices or throw their weight around, but those who accomplish their goals while maintaining their humanity. McKinley showed true strength requires no rudeness, while our next president would demonstrate why illness can become your greatest asset. Theodore Roosevelt became our youngest president after McKinley's assassination. He was a man of incredible energy, who went from sickly child to rugged outdoorsman through sheer willpower. Roosevelt's transformation reveals the surprising gifts hidden within physical limitations. Instead of being defined by childhood illness, he used it as motivation to rebuild himself through relentless physical activity. His journey teaches that sometimes your greatest weakness can become your driving force when you refuse to accept it as destiny. What looks like a disadvantage at the start of your story can become the central reason for your later success. Roosevelt's childhood illness became his motivation for greatness, while our next leader would show why the wrong job can lead to the right purpose. William Howard Taft was Roosevelt's chosen successor, who later became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He struggled with his weight and, according to legend, once got stuck in the White House bathtub, but accomplished more than many better-known presidents. Taft's unusual career path reveals why being in the wrong role can lead to your right purpose. Though an uninspired president, he found his true calling as Chief Justice, where he excelled. His journey proves that sometimes what looks like failure is actually redirection toward where you truly belong. Success isn't about forcing yourself to fit where others expect you. It's about having the courage to leave a prestigious position for one that actually suits your talents. Taft found his purpose by leaving the presidency, while our next leader would demonstrate why academic thinking can fail in the real world. Woodrow Wilson was a former college president who led America through World War I. He tried to create a League of Nations to prevent future wars, but failed when America rejected his vision. Wilson's presidency offers a sobering lesson about the gap between theory and practice. Though brilliant in academic settings, his idealistic visions often failed when confronted with political realities. His experience proves that intellectual brilliance doesn't automatically translate to practical effectiveness. Sometimes the people with the most impressive minds are the least capable of turning their ideas into reality because they underestimate the messy complexity of human affairs. Wilson's brilliance couldn't overcome practical realities, while our next president would teach us why charisma without character leads to disaster. Warren Harding promised a return to normalcy after World War I and was extremely popular while in office. After his death, massive corruption scandals were revealed in his administration. Harding's legacy demonstrates why likability is leadership's most dangerous trap. His friendly personality and good looks helped him win the presidency, but couldn't make him a good president. His administration proves that charm without character is a recipe for disaster. Sometimes the qualities that get you into leadership positions, good looks, charisma, likability, are completely unrelated to the qualities needed to succeed once you're there. Harding showed why charisma without substance fails, while our next president would demonstrate the surprising power of silence. Calvin Coolidge was known as Silent Cal because he said very little. He restored faith in the presidency after Harding's scandals through his honest, no-nonsense approach and careful use of words. Coolidge turned conventional communication wisdom on its head. In a world where leaders feel compelled to fill every silence, his restraint made his rare words carry extraordinary weight. His effectiveness teaches that sometimes the most powerful response isn't a clever comeback or lengthy explanation. It's purposeful silence. When everyone is talking, the quietest voice often becomes the most influential. Coolidge's strategic silence commanded attention, while our next president would reveal why expertise can be a handicap during crisis. Herbert Hoover was a brilliant engineer who coordinated massive humanitarian relief efforts before becoming president. Unfortunately, the Great Depression started on his watch, and his reputation never recovered. Hoover's presidency reveals the paradoxical trap of expertise. His previous success in humanitarian logistics actually hindered his ability to address the Depression because he tried to apply old solutions to a fundamentally new problem. His experience proves that sometimes your greatest strengths can become liabilities when circumstances change. Success in one domain can create dangerous blind spots that make you less adaptable precisely when adaptation matters most. Hoover's expertise became his limitation, while our next president would show why experimentation beats consistency in crisis. Franklin D. Roosevelt led America through both the Great Depression and World War II, despite being paralyzed from polio. He was elected 4 times and completely transformed the role of government in American life. Roosevelt shattered the myth that consistency is a leadership virtue. When traditional approaches failed during the Depression, he embraced a philosophy of bold experimentation, rather than dogmatic adherence to any single strategy. His willingness to try, fail, and try again proves that sometimes the best path forward isn't steady application of a single approach, but rapid testing of multiple solutions. In unprecedented circumstances, flexibility isn't indecisiveness. It's wisdom. Roosevelt's willingness to experiment solved massive problems, while our next leader would teach us about the power of ending the blame game. Harry Truman took office after Roosevelt's death and made the difficult decision to use atomic weapons to end World War II. His famous desk sign, "The buck stops here," showed his belief in taking full responsibility. Truman's leadership style reveals the counterintuitive power of claiming blame. Unlike leaders who point fingers when things go wrong, his willingness to take full responsibility actually increased his authority. His approach proves that accountability isn't a burden to avoid, but a source of unexpected strength. Sometimes the quickest path to solving problems isn't assigning blame elsewhere, but simply saying, "This is on me," and moving forward. Truman showed strength in claiming responsibility, while our next president would demonstrate why preparation matters more than inspiration. Dwight Eisenhower was the supreme Allied commander who led the D-Day invasion before becoming president. He built America's interstate highway system and warned about the dangers of the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower upends our romantic notions about leadership. Rather than stirring speeches or charismatic presence, his success came from methodical planning and careful thought. His career proves that inspiration is overrated compared to preparation. Sometimes the best leaders aren't those who move us with their words, but those who protect us with their foresight. Not because they saw something others couldn't see, but because they took the time to look. Eisenhower's methodical planning beat flashy leadership, while our next president would show how audacious goals motivate more than realistic ones. John F. Kennedy was our youngest elected president and inspired a generation with his vision of sending Americans to the moon. His assassination cut short a promising presidency that represented youth and new possibilities. Kennedy revealed the motivational power of seemingly impossible goals. By challenging America to reach the moon within a decade, something that appeared technologically unfeasible, he inspired achievement that realistic targets never could have. His leadership proves that sometimes the most practical approach isn't setting achievable goals, but declaring audacious ones. Human potential expands or contracts based on the challenges we're given. Kennedy's impossible goals achieved the impossible, while our next president would teach us about leveraging power to lift others. Lyndon Johnson grew up in poverty and became a master of getting laws passed in Congress. He pushed through civil rights legislation and created programs to fight poverty. But his presidency was damaged by the Vietnam War. Johnson demonstrates the surprising idea that power's true purpose isn't self-advancement, but elevation of others. Despite his rough personality, he used his political skill to pass civil rights legislation that helped millions. His presidency proves that the measure of leadership isn't how high you climb, but how many people you bring with you. Sometimes the toughest, most ambitious people make the greatest advocates for the vulnerable when they choose to use their power that way. Johnson used his power to lift others up, while our next president would demonstrate why achievements can't outrun character. Richard Nixon opened relations with China and ended American involvement in Vietnam. However, his presidency ended in disgrace when he resigned, rather than face impeachment over the Watergate scandal. Nixon's spectacular fall reveals why character flaws eventually overcome accomplishments. Despite major foreign policy breakthroughs, his presidency collapsed because of his willingness to break rules and cover up wrongdoing. His story demonstrates that achievement doesn't exempt you from the consequences of poor character. It just raises the height from which you'll eventually fall. Sometimes the most successful people are the most vulnerable to ethical shortcuts precisely because they believe their accomplishments protect them. Nixon's achievements couldn't save him from character flaws, while our next president would teach about the courage of unpopular mercy. Gerald Ford became president without being elected to either president or vice president after Nixon's resignation. He pardoned Nixon in a controversial decision that probably cost him the next election. Ford reveals the hidden courage in choosing mercy over justice. By pardoning Nixon, a deeply unpopular move that likely cost him the election, he prioritized national healing over personal political advantage. His decision proves that sometimes the bravest leadership acts aren't dramatic stands against enemies, but unpopular choices that benefit people who will never thank you for them. True courage often means willingly sacrificing your own future to secure someone else's. Ford sacrificed his career through unpopular mercy, while our next president would show how failure creates greater purpose. Jimmy Carter was a peanut farmer and nuclear engineer before becoming president. After leaving office, he's had one of the most active post-presidencies, building homes with Habitat for Humanity and working for peace worldwide. Carter flips the conventional narrative of presidential success. Though labeled a failed president, he found his true calling afterward, building a legacy of humanitarian work that has lasted decades longer than his presidency. His journey proves that sometimes what feels like your biggest public failure is actually preparing you for your real purpose. Carter found greater purpose after presidential failure, while our next president would show how communication trumps policy. Ronald Reagan was an actor who became one of our most influential presidents. Known as the Great Communicator, he had a gift for explaining complex ideas in simple, memorable ways. Reagan's success reveals why communication often matters more than policy expertise. Though critics dismissed him as just an actor, his ability to connect with ordinary Americans through clear, simple language was his greatest strength, not a limitation. His presidency proves that sometimes being understood is more powerful than being technically right. The leaders who change history aren't always those with the best plans, but those who can explain their vision in ways that move people to action. Reagan's communication skills trumped policy expertise, while our next president would teach us about the power of unglamorous preparation. George H.W. Bush had one of the most impressive resumes of any president, serving as vice president, CIA director, ambassador, and congressman. He skillfully managed the end of the Cold War and the First Gulf War. Bush's career path reveals the hidden value of unglamorous roles. While others sought spotlight positions, he built expertise through decades of behind-the-scenes service in thankless jobs. His experience proves that sometimes the least impressive parts of your resume are actually building the judgment you'll need when bigger opportunities arrive. The people best prepared for leadership are often those who didn't spend their careers trying to become leaders. Bush's lifetime in unglamorous service prepared him for crisis, while our next president would show how resilience matters more than avoiding mistakes. Bill Clinton grew up poor in a small Arkansas town, but became a Rhodes Scholar and two-term president. Despite personal scandals, he presided over a strong economy and left office with high approval ratings. Clinton's tumultuous career reveals why the ability to recover matters more than never falling. Despite scandals and setbacks that would have ended most political careers, his resilience kept him moving forward. His presidency proves that public figures aren't divided between those who make mistakes and those who don't. They're divided between those who can recover from them and those who can't. Resilience, not perfection, is the true separator between lasting success and forgotten potential. Clinton's comeback ability kept him on top, while our next president would teach us why controlling your narrative is essential. George W. Bush's presidency was defined by the September 11th attacks and the war on terror that followed. His approval rating went from the highest to among the lowest of any modern president. Bush's roller coaster presidency demonstrates how quickly others will define you if you don't define yourself. By initially letting others shape the narrative about his decisions, he later struggled to change public perception even when he tried. His experience teaches the vital importance of explaining your actions before others explain them for you. Sometimes maintaining control of your own story is as important as the decisions themselves. Bush's presidency shows the importance of controlling your narrative, while our next leader would demonstrate how timing transforms the impossible. Barack Obama became the first African-American president after a meteoric rise from state senator to president in just 4 years. His election represented a historic moment in America's ongoing struggle with race. Obama's unprecedented rise reveals how timing can transform impossibility into inevitability. Just years earlier, the idea of an African-American president seemed unrealistic, but he recognized a unique moment when the country was ready for change. His journey teaches us that sometimes the impossible becomes possible not through gradual progress, but through sudden shifts in what people believe can happen. The greatest opportunities often exist in the brief windows when the seemingly impossible hasn't yet been recognized as inevitable. Obama's historic rise showed the power of recognizing moments of change, while our next president would reveal how breaking conventions creates new paths. Donald Trump was the first president with no prior government or military experience. A businessman and TV personality, he used social media to communicate directly with supporters, bypassing traditional media channels. Trump demonstrates why breaking established rules sometimes works when nothing else will. By ignoring the traditional path to the presidency and creating his own playbook, he achieved what conventional approaches couldn't. His unconventional rise proves that sometimes the wrong way, according to experts, is exactly right for changing the game. The path to breakthrough often requires abandoning the very practices that others consider essential. Trump's rule-breaking approach changed political campaigns, while our next president would demonstrate the power of patient persistence. Joe Biden became president after nearly 50 years in public service, including 8 years as vice president. He took office during a pandemic that had killed hundreds of thousands of Americans and deeply divided the nation. Biden's decades-long journey to the presidency reveals the undeniable value of delayed gratification. After running for president 3 times over 32 years before winning, he achieved what younger versions of himself couldn't. His persistence proves that some goals take far longer than we expect, and giving up too soon might mean missing your moment. Sometimes what looks like failure after failure is actually preparation for success that couldn't have come any sooner. But even with all this life advice from America's presidents, you probably still have bad habits school brainwashed into you to keep you being average. If you want to retrain your mind and reach your full potential, watch this video next about life cheat codes you didn't learn in school.